if you can't enjoy something 100% the first time you consume it, whether it's music, movie, television, I think we think it's bad. I mean, I'm not going to get on a big soapbox like, oh, shorts like on YouTube are garbage. I'm not trying to say I watch a lot of shorts, but it's like the idea if we can't consume something in 60 seconds and understand all of it, then there's no point in it. I think there's a lot of point in art that you cannot consume and understand and digest in one sitting. And I think it's a shame that I think as humans, we're losing that patience and that skill.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Holy Moment Podcast. You know it by now. The Holy Moment Podcast, where we watch films with you, and then we discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, and the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. As I guess always, I'm your host, Nathaniel Lirio, and I'm joined by my two beautiful, beautiful friends. Let's start with you this week, Vega. Who are you?
My name is Christopher Vega, Christoph Vega, as our old professor, well, not old, a couple decades older than us, film professor used to call me. And I am a DP editor based out of South Georgia.
And then my lovely friend above me, Jeffrey.
I'm Jeffrey Nichols, and you know what? I'm feeling very paranoid right now. In fact, I'm feeling like the whole world is conspiring against me. I'm feeling like my closest friends are perhaps even conspiring against me. And that's because, you want to guess why?
Why?
It's because I haven't hosted a single episode. And what, this is our 5th episode? That's insane. The system is rigged against me. They're trying to teach me some moral lesson. I don't know.
Jeffrey, I don't know how to tell you this. You're the one that pulls the movies out of the hat. The only one able to rig this is quite literally your hand. It was funny. I was going to go off a riff on how I'm being conspired against because last week you guys wore your green sweaters to make me look like an idiot. And then this week you guys are going all like dark, mysterious Batman with your like lighting. I'm over here all lit up like a goofball and you guys look cool and mysterious. So, maybe my friends are the one conspiring against me.
Vega, how are we conspiring against you? Hypothetically,
I'm
because we would never
conspired against in that. Well, I can't even see what I was gonna say. I was gonna say because I haven't seen these guys' lovely faces in person in a while, but I quite literally saw Nathaniel yesterday.
Yeah, you fed me soup.
That is true.
It was not sexual.
Debatable.
Well, with that being said, welcome back, everyone. This past week, we watched The Game by David Fincher. It was my pick for the category Made by a Criminal. I didn't realize it when I picked it. I guess I just assumed Sean Penn, being a pretty famous actor, he was going to be the lead role, but he was kind of a supporting character. But a little bit of background, Sean Penn has had a few run-ins with the law, but his time he actually spent in jail was... In 1987, he was arrested for punching Jeffrey clean, an extra on a set of his film Colors. So I couldn't find a lot of information, but I guess they had some type of argument and he ended up assaulting him and he ended up spending 33 days in jail. It was supposed to be 60 days, but I guess he got let off on good behavior or whatnot. But he's been known to have a hot temper in general. He punched another or assaulted another, what do they call paparazzi?
Paparazzi.
How do you say that word? Yeah, the Lady Gaga song. He punched a paparazzi in 2010. I think he didn't get jail time, but he got 300 hours of community service. And when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock at the Oscars a few years ago, he was so pissed. He was like, I did that and I got 300 hours of community service. And he did it. And, he got banned from the Oscars. This is stupid. But yeah, so that's why I picked it. It was my pick for Made by a Criminal. The hat hates Jeffrey, so we're never, ever going to watch any of his movies. Let's place a bet. At this point, I have 2 movies left in the hat. Vega has 4. Oh my goodness. My Discord is saying balloons. Beautiful. Vega has 4 left in the hat, and Jeffrey has all 5. I bet that we're going to pull Vega's movie today. What are you betting, Vega?
I feel like probabilities wise, I'm not a math person. I'm close to a couple of math people, but I feel like it probably will be me over any of Jeffrey's picks because I just don't think he put him in a hat.
I like you said I'm not a math person, then proceeded to not be able to do the probability of you having 4 and him having 5.
No, but hear me out. I don't think they're in the hat.
Oh yeah,
I
you
mean,
know
I
they're
think
not
I
in the
agree
hat
with you.
because the system's rigged. You're rigging it against me.
Well,
And,
you know,
and
actually, Jeffrey,
don't you say anything about me having the hat, because I fully believe that you could convince Maximus to fiddle with the results, to take some ballots out of the.
See, this is like something. That what you're saying right now really reminds me of something that we just watched.
I mean, that might be someone going paranoid and coming a little crazy. Also, Jeffrey, you think I would trust Maximus? Chat, this is Jeffrey's roommate. For such an important conspiracy, if I was conspiring against you, I would break into your house, drug you, and then remove all of your stuff from the hat. But I'm not doing that, chat.
That would have
Wink,
been more
wink.
dramatic. Also,
It would have been.
I didn't learn that Sean Penn was in this movie until the credits, because I can't recognize actors or names.
Me neither.
And as soon as I saw the name Sean Penn, I was like, Boromir? And then I looked it up. I was like, no, that's Sean Bean.
No, one of my biggest shameful points of being a filmmaker is like I'm just so bad with actors, directors, producers. I mean, it was good going to film school and like meeting other people and talking about films repetitively, but like I got to film school and like knew I don't know, maybe Michael Bay's name. Like I didn't know anyone, and I still don't know anyone. I will say I watched a lot of David Fincher in college while attending film school, and I really like David Fincher. But before we get into that, let me give a little bit of background on this movie we watched. So it's The Game. It was released September 12th, 1997. The studio behind it was Polygram Filmed Entertainment, directed by the one, the only David Fincher. Other movies, he did Seven, The Social Network, Gone Girl. The budget was estimated at about $50 million. It pretty much doubled that in box office, about $110 million. The cast, our lead actor was Michael Douglas, who played Nicholas Van Orton. Deborah Cora Unger played Christine, and Sean Penn played Conrad, Nicholas's younger brother. Surprisingly, for being, in my opinion, a very good film and kind of, being a David Fincher film, it only won one award. It won the Saturn Award for the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. I did a little bit of research. I don't think this is a film festival. I think it's like an academy of people that give out like just this prestigious award. It's not like, hey, everyone enter your films and we'll like watch them and judge them. It's more just like, hey, you did really good. It kind of like I'm not saying it's on the same level, but like the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know if you submit your name to the Nobel Peace Prize, but to be honest, I don't know anything about the Nobel Peace Prize, considering I'm not even saying it correctly. The point is, it's not a film festival, and I'm just surprised that it only won like one award, period. And I don't know, maybe it's because like these bigger movies, you're not like, they're making it for the big screen, where they're not trying to put it into like film festivals. I don't know. But here is a little bit of background. Usually I write these out. My synopsis is all nice and neat and beautiful, and I use Grammarly to make sure it makes sense. But I'm just going to go off the cuff today because I want it to be a little more raw. So here is Nathaniel's synopsis of The Game. You have this dude. His name is Nick. He is a super rich banker. He likes cake, I believe. Apparently he is a dick. I didn't really get that vibe, but apparently he's a rich dick. He has a really nice maid who lives across the hall from him. It's not sexual. What else happened? He has a younger brother who does drugs, not all the time. And his younger brother was like, hey, you should go to these people. And then he said, okay. And he went to these people, and they do really specific games for each individualized person. So they like tailor make a game for you. They don't tell you what it's about. They don't tell you how it works. You just sign a bunch of legal documents and you take like a bunch of probably very invasive tests. And then he proceeds to get mind effed for the next hour and a half of our lives. But like, I don't know, like maybe 5-7 days of his life, where the CRS, that's the company that does this game type thing, just does the most crazy, inhumane things to him, really gets in his mind, from, throwing dolls off his roof, like how his father committed suicide, to shooting at him with guns. He goes kind of crazy. He falls in love with a waiter, but at first he berates the waiter. He doesn't want to help someone who's choking. And that is my synopsis of this movie. Did I miss anything, guys?
That pretty much captures it. Well, I guess we're discussing this film with the assumption that our audience has seen the movie, and so would you be fine with sharing how it ends?
This is true. This is true. Go watch the movie. Watch the movie when we tell you what movie to watch at the end of this week as well. But yeah, well, I'm sure we'll get into this more in the podcast. But yeah, how it ends is we're soon led to believe that the CRS is all a scam. Actually, what's taking place is that they're trying to get a hold of his millions and millions and millions of dollars by basically making him paranoid and giving away personal information. And so that's what we're led to believe by like the beginning of like the third act, maybe the middle of the second act. And then at the very end, he kind of goes crazy and he's like, well, these people took everything from me. They took my money. I've gone insane. I can't trust anyone. So he's like on top of the roof of the CRS. He broke in. He has a hostage and he ends up shooting his own brother out of the confusion. And he's like, well, this sucks. Now I'm a murderer with no money. So I'm going to jump off this roof just like how my own father jumped off a roof and killed himself. So he jumps off the roof, but he actually falls through glass and lands in a really, really big parachute baggy thing. If you've seen Sherlock, the BBC television show, you know what I'm talking about. And it is revealed that it really was just a game. It was not a scam. CRS made it look like a scam to make it even more convincing. But this was actually a big birthday party present thrown by his brother Conrad, because apparently he was becoming such a dick that Conrad was like, the only way to snap him out of it is to literally uproot the very foundation of his known reality and existence and truth. That will make him less of a dick. And then he also goes to get coffee with the woman that he originally berated as a waitress, because I guess they fell in love at some point. Stockholm Syndrome. There we go. That is the very unconcise version of the synopsis.
I just want to say that I think that David Fincher did a great job of making you feel the suspense and making you anxious and personally paranoid about like who all's a friend and who all's a foe. Is that person involved? Is that person involved? That cat that's walking across the street is there a camera somewhere on him? But despite how well executed the suspense was, it's still a very funny premise,
Yeah. It definitely had me on the edge of my seat, but it was goofy. Whereas one of his other movies, I guess Seven is probably a better comparison than Gone Girl, but both work. Both like you're on the edge of your seat at every moment, and they're not funny, guys. The opposite of funny. They're upsetting and hard to watch. This one was like a good mix of like, I'm really stressed right now. What could happen? But also like, this is such a goofy scenario and funny. And then the twist at the end that reveals it was just a birthday party made it so fun, which I think really good on David Fincher for being able to like walk the line of, hey, I'm going to take this really serious and make my audience feel stressed, but also have certain comical, outlandish moments. Because I think sometimes when you introduce comical and outlandish moments, you undercut the tension you create as a director. So he did a good job of keeping both, I think, at least.
Well, the thing about the reveal that it was a birthday party is it does undercut the tension, but in a way that's very intentional. And rather than it being disappointing, it's like, it's a sigh of relief and then a chuckle,
That should be the log line of this movie. A sigh of stress, sigh of relief, then a chuckle. But before we get too far into the weeds of the movie, I have a really specific question for you guys that I'm curious about. Are either of you aware of The Game?
I am aware of The Game.
Are you, Jeffrey? No, sorry. Are you, Vega?
Yeah, to sound modern, not that I don't sound modern on other episodes, but to sound really modern, I think you're a hoe for saying and mentioning The Game. Because what do you mean that I think, did we lose knowing what referencing it is like losing it, right?
Yeah.
I think you're a hoe for that.
Yeah. Hey, I had to lose The Game last night watching that movie, so I knew I had to make my co-hosts and everyone that watched this movie for the rest of eternity lose The Game. So you guys both know about it, but for the audiences that don't, really quick, I have no idea if this movie at all had any correlation to what I'm about to explain, but all I could think about while watching this movie was this. I don't know when. I don't think anyone does. I think it's been around since the beginning of time. But The Game is the idea that every single human, the moment they are born, is entered into the game, and the only way to exit is death. Even though you don't know you're playing, some people don't, you are playing the game. And once it is revealed so for example, let's say Jeffrey didn't know what the game was. I was reminded of the game. I then tell Jeffrey, hey, there's this game that every human is involved in. Now you're involved in it. Now Jeffrey has the knowledge of the game. And the point of the game is to go the longest period in your life without thinking about the game. The moment you think about the game, you lose. You have to say out loud, I have lost the game. And one of two things happens. For example, Jeffrey and Vega, they both know. So now they have lost. But let's say Vega knew, but Jeffrey didn't. Well, Vega loses, and I now introduce Jeffrey into the game, and now he's conscious of it. So the game is always is always going on. It's like an infection that is always being spread, which is kind of like this podcast. That's the goal. We hope it's like the game, just an infection that kind of spreads everywhere. But so yeah. Anyone that's listening that didn't know about it, you are now involved, and you cannot be involved until you die.
Well, there's another game too that I think Vega started. If not him, then one of our other friends. And I don't know if you remember this, Vega.
This is vile if it's what I think you're going to say.
It would
out loud and
we can cut it out if we
world.
need to. But
Watch
you
it be something
need
really
to.
like sweet and nice, and Vega just like outed himself.
So the
Now, this
idea is
crazy.
Vega would stare at your crotch,
Nah.
and and the idea is the moment you start to squirm or look uncomfortable is the moment that you lose the game.
Oh, I've never been privy to playing this game with you, Vega.
Here's some context because I think Jeffrey is trying to get me like thrown in like forever jail, probably. Me and my old roommate, who will remain unnamed,
This is
in
a bad start.
college.
Continue.
thought it would be funny between the two. Like it was just, I don't know, we were probably standing somewhere and maybe there was like a suite mate. And then like that was like, we just wanted to make a game. And then that was just the immediate first thought that we could think of. It's not non-consensual. Everyone who's a part of the game, this game, is explain the rule. And if they don't want to be a part of it, they don't have to be a part of it. It's not, you know.
Yes,
weird.
I meant to preface my explanation with, it is 100% consensual. Vega's a very respectful guy of boundaries.
Well,
However,
let me
that is the game.
Let me follow it up and say, I give you full consent to play this game with me, Vega. And the fact that I saw you yesterday in the flesh and we didn't play, disappointed.
That's crazy. That is a crazy phrasing. Anyways.
You're so right. Well, thank you guys for indulging me, seeing if you guys knew about the original game. And yeah, to all those suckers out there who didn't know about it, you're now playing it. Best of luck. One last question about it. Do you guys know like the longest you've gone without thinking? Okay, two questions. A, when were you introduced to the game? B, what's the longest you've gone without thinking about it?
I feel like it must have been in middle school.
Yeah, same for me. It was like 4th, 5th grade.
I think it was shoot. Yeah, it might have been like 7th or 8th grade for me by a guy named Caleb Thompson. I think the longest I've gone without it's probably, unless there was some meme that I just don't remember, I think it was most of 2023.
2020. Oh, okay. Nice. What about you, Jeffrey? Do you?
I feel like there was probably a time that spanned 2 or 3 years.
Well, yeah, that's also impressive. I found out about it around the same time. You guys remember like the whole like, if you see a circle below your waist, you get to punch the person. Did you guys play that game?
No, I just punched people.
Oh no. Vega's just a menace staring at your crotch, beating you. Kidding.
Crazy.
Let me say again, sweet human being. Love him to death. Okay, but jumping actually into the movie. So I had a question for you guys. Being a David Fincher film, he's not quite like M. Night Shyamalan. He's not like, all of his twist, like every movie has is like a crazy twist. But like a lot of his movies have dramatic twists that are really, really well done. Gone Girl, I guess I'm not going to spoil Gone Girl and Seven. They both have twists. Both movies I'd love to review on this podcast. But this movie also had the twist of like setting it up that the game was actually hijacking and stealing his money and trying to kill him, only to be revealed that it's a big birthday party. Did you guys see A, the twist coming at any point, and B, did it work for you? Because afterwards, I was just reading some friends' Letterboxd reviews, and it was very torn. Some people were like, "Oh, this is hilarious, and this works really well," and some people were like, "Oh, this undermined everything. This was stupid. It ruined the movie for me." So, did you guys see the twist coming at all? And like, did it change? Was it neutral? Was it a net positive, a net negative, or just neutral?
I think that I was convinced after the end of the first act that Nick was going to die. I was fully convinced. I was fully expecting that. I was thinking this force that he has encountered is so beyond what he is capable of thwarting. It just seems like an inevitability, right? Everyone is in on it. It's a hopeless situation. And it probably will, for the poetry of it, end in him falling off of a building. And so I expected the false twist, but not the real twist.
Okay, not the double twist. The classic double reverse Uno card that he hit us with. And then did you like the ultimate twist? Because yeah, like you said, there's a lot of twists throughout. Like, oh no, he's actually stealing his money. Oh no, he shot his brother. Oh no, he jumped off a roof. Like there's a lot of small back and forths, but like the big final one of It's a Birthday Party. What'd you think of that?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was so fun. I thought it was so entertaining. Yeah, I think that if it had ended on him falling off of the building and killing himself, I still would have liked the film, but I would not have called it entertaining.
Yeah. It definitely would have been closer to like Seven and Gone Girl, where you watch this character be driven to insane measures by the world he lives in, the people around him, until he has to take really drastic measures. But I mean, he does, but thankfully it's a little happier. And then also, I guess before we keep talking, let me preference everything we say from here on forth, just in one quick sentence. Jeffrey, did you like this movie?
I did. I really enjoyed it.
Okay. And then Vega, did you like this movie?
No.
Okay, good. I just figured, I think just knowing probably where our mind is, if we like something or don't like it, it will kind of give some color to what we have to say about it moving forward. So what about you, Vega? Did you pull a big brain, I knew the twist, and did it affect your thoughts on the movie?
It may not have been like a necessarily big brain. I knew specifically exactly the twist, but like in generalities, I think I kind of saw it coming ish. The double thing, like I don't know if I like got exactly like what it was going to be at the end necessarily, as much as there's no way they're gonna do that. There has to be something else kind of thing. Like he's not just gonna die. Like you can't spend. I think the longer he fell, the more it was like, yeah, he's not gonna die. That took forever.
Hear me out. What if he just flew?
See,
Birdman.
I was in a meeting at work and that movie actually got referenced. If you're talking about Birdman, that movie got referenced.
Yeah, he just before he splats, he flies away, just roll credits, no explanation whatsoever. Which I mean, yeah, Birdman. Okay, yeah, I'm in the same boat as both of you. I guess more so as Jeffrey, but pretty much close to you, Vega. Where I think at the end of the first act, at the end of the third act, you know, when the movie credit rolled, I really knew there was going to be a twist. No, at the end of the first act, I think kind of when he goes home and his mansion has been broken into and there's graffiti everywhere. Really, really cool, well-edited scene that has an awesome song that I can't remember the name of it. But that moment was when I also thought like, oh, this is going to be dark. This is going to end poorly. This is going to be a hard watch. Like, because the setup of the movie, I felt like I even told like I watched it with my girlfriend. I was like, man, we got this like depressed, kind of a dick banker, you know, it seems like a really grounded, really serious movie. Oh, a little bit of background. I knew nothing going into this movie. Literally nothing. Okay, that's all the background. Besides those David Fincher, which I feel like that kind of gives you a lot of background in general. But yeah, I knew nothing going into this movie. So I remember thinking the first like 10 minutes of the movie, I was like, man, I feel like I'm watching two different movies. Like we have such a grounded, like, oh, this is going to be a drama. I'm a depressed banker. Boo, I need help. But then anytime like the CRS got mentioned and then when he went in for his physical, it almost felt like they were going to reveal themselves to be aliens. Like just something was off, which again was done on purpose. I don't think it was like an accident and bad directing. Like it was done on purpose. Like this combining of these two vibes in the movie. But it was this kind of like duality that made me in the first act be like, is this going to be funny? Is this going to end sad? Is it going to be serious? What is this going to be? But when we got to the end of that first act and the break into the mansion, and this is kind of where he first starts to really become really paranoid. And he starts to realize I am in over my head. There's nothing I can do. So I thought at that point we were going to go more like the Gone Girl 7 route, where it's going to be really upsetting and depressing, and he was going to end up killing himself at the end of the movie. It was, I would say, entering into the third act, somewhere in the middle of the second act and entering the third act, specifically after he goes to Christine's house to confront her, the waitress, that he's like, you're in on this. I know you're part of this group. I know you're trying to like heist me. Who are you? What are you doing? And she reveals like, yes, I work for them, but I'm just as much a hostage as you are. If I don't do what they say, they'll kill me. And then when it's just them two driving away in the car and he calls his like overseas bank to be like, hey, is my money still in my account? And they're like, hey, we need you to like give like the code so we know you're authentic. And he gives the code and it cuts to her. I think it was very, it was done on purpose, but I was like, okay, wait a minute. Something's going on here that's not just like, in that moment, I knew there was going to be some type of twist that was more than just they're scamming him. I don't know what it was, but I was just like, okay, it's too simple. It's too clean to be like, oh, and Christine was a double agent and they scammed him out of his money. So I also was not expecting at all the birthday twist, but I definitely entered into that third act. I was like, something's going to happen. Even after he shot his brother, I was like, that's not the end. But again, they definitely hoodwinked me when he jumped off like a huge, huge hotel roof and then fell on a big inflatable tarp.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you in that, like, the first part of the first act, there was a sense of unreality to it, that made me think of the Twilight Zone, honestly. Just the way that people were referring to the game and how it's life-changing and no one would be specific about what the game was, and the played-up excitement or happiness of the employees, and the fact that he had to undergo all of these tests. It's just eerie and almost otherworldly about it, which it didn't end up going in that direction, but I also came into it completely blind. So I hadn't even looked up the premise, and I think that's the way to watch this movie, because he also was coming into it completely blind, and we're experiencing this with him.
No, for it definitely is one of those movies more fun to watch knowing not like nothing about the premise. Let me ask you, Vega. I feel like I always have a hard time pegging where I feel like you're going to be coming from with a movie. I never know if you're going to like a movie, not like a movie. What was it about this movie that you didn't enjoy? Like I feel like Jeffrey and I were very entertained. I'm not sure if Jeffrey thought it was phenomenal or not, but I'm curious what made you kind of have a disdain for it.
I think the real tell for like whether I'll like a movie or not is like if it's good. So there's that.
Okay.
And then
If
beyond
it's good.
Yeah, beyond that though.
Okay. Man just shits on my taste.
No, but did you both went to like a sort of high school where you guys read books that generally were read by people of like the same age across like most of the United States, right?
Yeah, like To Kill a Mockingbird.
That kind of stuff, or like Julius Caesar at some point, probably, maybe that kind of. This felt like like a short story or like that kind of book that exists in one of those kind of classes, but it's like so boring and so mid and so like I don't care. I don't know. It just was so. I think there's cool things about like people watching, maybe like with complete strangers, and then like maybe. Like learning things about people just by like watching, just learning things about people by watching them. But for this, it just kind of felt like, hey, here's this guy who you don't really, at least I never really found any reason to super care for or for like relate to, or like it's just some guy, just some dude. And then now I have to just kind of like, I know the movie is telling me that I should care about what on earth is going on with this guy, and then like, oh no, maybe the whole world's on to you, or like out to get you. But like, it just never kind of clicked for me to have a. I mean, I in the sense of like having compassion for all people, sure, but in the sense of like I don't care what's happening to him. It's so, but I don't know. I did not relate to it. I didn't like find myself in it or anything like that. It was just so. Bleh.
Would you say, let's say Nick, different backstory, different person, different whatever, they set him up in a way that you could relate to, or maybe not even relate to, but enjoyed or understood. Do you think the rest of the movie, just the general same structure, would you have enjoyed it then? Or do you still feel like it would not have been a movie for you? Even if you're like, oh, I like this guy, or oh, I don't like this guy, I want to see his demise. You just were like engaged with our protagonist. Or had you still been like, even if I found him interesting, the general concept and the execution still boring?
I just think it's I still think it may have been like if you take the general overarching themes of like what or like the ways it uses certain storytelling techniques, then sure, but then that's just a different story at that point. In the little pre-show to what we were talking about, like there was talks of how it's sort of similar-ish to like the Truman Show, ish. So like there's other movies that take elements of or do elements of what's going on here, and then I think just might have more to say about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I might just have to like watch a billion YouTube videos telling me this is why you should like David Fincher's The Game to like get a bit of appreciation for the film all in all. But it just never really like there's no like, not that I have to see explicit representation of it, like something that's like something that I am kind of thing maybe, but I just didn't, it never really dragged me in to connect with it, which I just feel like it might just, I don't know at what point in the whole storytelling process that did not work for me. I just know that I did not connect with the character or like the movie. There was some cool things that happened, sure, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And actually, that brings up, I think, my biggest gripe with the movie. Because let me say, overall, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was the perfect level of entertaining mixed with suspense. And I don't think you get that very often. I don't think you often get suspense that maybe at the end of the day leaves you feeling good. Like at the end of the movie where he goes and like the last thing we see is like the girl inviting him to go get coffee with her. Like kind of this idea of a hopeful ending. And it felt very like romantic. Like it's also, it was filmed like in 1997, probably still on film. It had the look of older movies. I felt like it almost ended on like not a romantic moment, like, oh, these two characters are getting together, but like a romanticized moment. Like Hollywood in the 70s, everything was like, just like the big picture was romanticized with the feeling of it. That's kind of how like the movie ended for me, which I really appreciated. It balanced these two things. But my biggest gripe in the movie is kind of where you're coming from, Vega. I don't quite understand the character of Nick. And it's funny because I don't understand him in a unique way compared to other movies. I feel like other movies, I'm like, I don't get this character at all. I don't get their motivation. I don't get what they're doing. I don't like them. I'm confused. Bad. I actually, funny enough, I really like the character of Nick. I'm not saying it was the deepest character or anything super complicated, but I actually found I might maybe regret what I'm about to say because how they kind of portrayed him, but I found him charming and sweet and nice. Like I actually found myself not like halfway through, not 2/3 of the way through in his life is hell, like from the beginning, from like the opening scene, I found myself rooting for this character. However, at the end of the movie, we are led to believe that Conrad, the brother, has paid millions of dollars for CBS to do this huge game, all in hope because his brother has become a cynical asshole. His brother has become just like a rich dick. But to me, I never felt like Nick was a rich dick. And I'll get into reasons why I personally feel that way. But let me ask you guys first. Did you guys feel like Nick was a character that was just set up like, oh, he's rich, he's a jerk, he has to go through this like emotionally exhausting, manipulative, abusive game, and now he's not a dick because he sees the world as like, oh, people are worth being nice to? Like what was Nick's character arc for you? Not like what the movie was doing for you guys. Like, well, what did you come out being like, oh, that's what happened to this character? That's where he started, that's where he ended. And I know maybe for you, Vega, it might be hard to answer because you're kind of like, maybe that's one of your gripes. You're like, I didn't even see any type of character arc with this guy, which is understandably a fair issue.
It might just circle back into maybe not understanding the film in the way that like Fincher intended or whatever, but it sort of almost just feels like there's just this guy that kind of sucks, sort of ish, and then he's like, I don't know. It's like I want it. Like I guess the way I think the film structure is supposed to work, that this is supposed to make him a better person or something like that. But I don't think it really does necessarily. it kind of just like traumatizes him. I believe it's like instead of maybe like letting him go to therapy or something, or just like giving him like a friend or some, I don't know. It's just like for like holding a gun to his head, kind of. Well, I mean, throughout the forcing, I don't know, driving him insane for what? For what? Boo, boo, boo. Yeah, there's my really, that's all that film school being put to work right there. Boo.
That's what makes this movie so funny to me is they have masterminded this whole series of events, and they're counting on him shooting his brother and believing that he has killed his own brother, and they're counting on him attempting suicide. And the end result is happy birthday. We hope you're not a dick anymore. But then I agree with you. Nathaniel, in that I don't think he was like that much of a dick. I mean, I think that was his arc, right? He was a bit selfish. He was cold. He was distant. He didn't let people in, but he was still supportive of his brother, right? And offered to give him any assistance that he needed. So that's a point in his favor at the beginning of the film. He didn't want to save a guy that was choking. He didn't know what to do. We see a billion of those guys, like just in our day-to-day lives. And if the things that happened to Nick happened to them, it's just so over the top.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to bring it back around to. My kind of issue with Nick's character arc that I think they were portraying, and I wish they had portrayed it differently, was the we see him being a genuine jerk with no reason, like twice in the movie. However, every time he is a jerk to someone is either A, warranted, or B, it's because he's going insane, and you cannot blame him. Like when that guy is like, so he's at a restaurant, the waitress who ends up being the secret spy spills water on him, and he gets pissed off at her. And normally you would be like, rich billionaire being pissed off at like the blue collar worker just trying to pay her bills and prize a child. But the scene didn't come across that way. Again, he's paranoid at the moment. The reason he yelled at her is because maybe you could say he would have yelled at her any other like day of the week. But in this moment, he's yelling at her because he feels like people are watching him. The world is closing in on him. And every subsequent scene after that is the same thing. When he doesn't give the guy in the airport bathroom toilet paper, he feels like he's being watched. He's going, like you can make the argument he should have done the nice thing anyways, but I don't. I think like would we have if we feel like we're going insane, someone's watching us? They literally have toying with his mind. The most like horrendous thing that ever happened to him, his father committing suicide. They're like reenacting it in front of him. Like it makes sense. He's not emotionally in the place to be nice to people.
Yeah.
And then I think what a lot of other people will point to is, well, what about him firing his I don't know, money man guy that works for him, makes a bunch of money. There's a scene where he flies to a different city to go fire like someone who sees over his branch and like stock brokerage or something. And people are like, oh, just because he didn't meet his quota and he's firing him. He was going to fire him set up long before he partook in the game. So maybe you can't use the excuse as the game as the he's being a dick right now. But in my opinion, he wasn't that much of a dick. He came in and said, hey, look, you've been with the company for a long time. You are currently failing us. Just because you were my father's friend doesn't mean I should sit on my hands and let you kind of ruin the people's money, like the people's money that I am in charge investing. Like I genuinely like sure, he could have done a little nicer, but I really feel like he was just doing his job as someone who is managing millions and millions of dollars and being like, hey, this isn't personal. You have done a bad job. We're going to give you a good severance package. You should go spend time with your wife and like daughter. Like that didn't feel like a dick thing to me. And I really feel like how he handled it was relatively okay. Not saying perfect.
No, that totally makes sense. I feel like the whole game was an overreaction. It's like if he sucked that bad, then maybe it was worth it. But like, what on earth? Like imagine like me and Nathaniel have been like actively plotting against Jeffrey to not get his movie picked, and then Jeffrey just crashes out, and then then the next like however long, how many, it was like 4 days, 5 days, something like that, of our lives are like the guy from the game, because we just kind of suck. And then Nathaniel has to like shoot me. And then it's revealed, actually, no, I don't know. I don't know what the equivalency would be there, but oh my God, it was so pointless. Maybe pointless.
Yeah.
So, earlier you mentioned, Vega, that before the show we had compared the movie to The Truman Show, but we also compared it to A Christmas Carol, right? We said it was an intersection between The Truman Show and A Christmas Carol. And The Christmas Carol is a great example of a story that does something similar, where the bad guy undergoes a series of traumatic events, and by the end of it, he is changed, right? But the thing that they do really, really well that this movie doesn't do quite as well is demonstrating from the get-go that Ebenezer Scrooge is an awful person, right?
Mhm.
He's just solely concerned with money, no concern whatsoever for his employees, spits on orphans, probably. And even if it doesn't say that in the book, you just get that sense. It's like, oh, I wouldn't put it past him, you know? Whereas with this one, it's just like, a jerk sometimes.
Yeah. And this is to bring it full circle. I know we've been on this section of the movie for the past like 10, 15 minutes, but this is where I want to bring it full circle. I would like, and it unfortunately doesn't quite line up with how the movie's executed, but I would like to say my headcanon, which I think makes it better, it kind of fixes a lot of the issues, is yes, Nick is arguably a little bit of a dick. Like sometimes, like more than you probably should be in real life. But I would like to say it is the trauma of seeing his father commit suicide, then inheriting this money and having the pressure to upkeep these. Because you even hear like Nick and Conrad get into a big argument. How Conrad's like, you never let me be who I want to be. You always have to be the perfect son, the perfect blah, blah, blah. I like to believe like, Nick was traumatized by his father committing suicide. He feels the pressure to take on this role of the perfect businessman, very formal, very regal, makes all the right decisions. He has this pressure, and deep down, he had this conversation with his maid, who's like kind of like an Alfred to Bruce, has been in the family forever. Alfred to I almost said Bruce Banner. Bruce, who's Batman?
Bruce Wayne.
Bruce Wayne. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. But yeah, for those who don't know Batman, yeah, so it's like an Alfred to Bruce Wayne type of vibe, where like the maid is a lot older and has been a maid for the family for a long time. But he was in the kitchen asking her, like, hey, what was my father like? And she was kind of giving him background of what the father, and one of the last sentences he said, kind of in reference to the father killing himself, was, what if there's a little bit of me and my father? No, what if there's a little bit of my father and me? And so I like to think this story is much more about Nick being on the verge of suicide. Yeah, he's a dick, but deep down, him being a dick is just a cover up for the pain of being alone, the pain of seeing his father kill himself, the pain of like, he's like, yeah, he's a billionaire, but why is he complaining? He's like a billionaire, but he just feels alone. I'm sure there's in a world he doesn't even want the money. He's like, I want to feel like I have it. Like Vega said, go to therapy, have a friend. So I like to think that the game wasn't thrown to make him less of a dick, but to get to a deeper seated issue. Like, hey, you're a dick, but it's because you're so hollow on the inside from these things that happened, and no one's been taking care of you, and you're on the verge of suicide. Again, I don't think that's what maybe David Fincher was going for, and I don't think that's quite what is actually expressed, unfortunately. But that's my big gripe with the movie is, A, if they are just going for, he's a dick, here's the game, now he's not a dick, they didn't do enough setting up he's a dick. But even if they did, there was a better, deeper story in there of like, there's a reason he's a jerk. There's a reason he acts this way. And it's because he is deeply sorrowful and depressed because of his backstory.
So what you're saying is like the game inside of the game is like the most expensive version of immersion therapy probably ever.
Yeah, no, 100%. That is exactly it. Like the game is just some super, super, super expensive version of like, yeah, immersion therapy. You know what it is? It's like LARPing. It's like LARPing to feel better.
It's like, we want you to not want to kill yourself, and so we're going to make you want to kill yourself so that you don't want to kill yourself.
See, I don't think any of the things that happened in this movie would have taken place if he just had a pair of like VR goggles.
I feel like there are elements of that are definitely implied. And regarding that kitchen scene with the maid, I thought it was so sad. When he makes that statement, he's like, "Man, maybe there's a bit of my father in me," right? And he hasn't talked about his father much at all since he passed. And even the maid comments on it. It's like, you've never asked about your dad before. But in this moment, he's reaching for some way to connect to his father. And immediately the maid's like, "I'm afraid not. There's like nothing of your father in you." And we cut to his face, and I thought that I could detect real hurt there. It's like, okay, well, I guess I've expressed this vulnerability to you, but now it hasn't gotten me anywhere, right? It's sort of reinforcing this attitude that he has held from the beginning of the film,
Yeah, well, which is interesting because it's obvious that the maid cares for him. It's obvious that she cares for him. And it's interesting that she's saying there's no father, there's none of that in you like your father. She's talking about like the suicide nature. Like I think, at least to me, it was obvious that she was trying to be like, no, like, don't worry, like, you're a good person. You're not going to end up like him. But you're right, Jeffrey. I bet he probably took it like, whether he meant it or didn't mean it, when she said that, he probably was like, well, what if I want to be like my father? Not like in the sense of he killed himself, but in the sense of like, I look like he killed himself when I was like 10. When I was a 10-year-old, I looked up to my father. And now you're telling me I'm nothing like the man I want to be like. So who am I?
And she said very nice things about his father, if I'm remembering correctly. It's like, oh, your father was a good man. He loved his wife very much. And he was sort of quiet and unassuming. People didn't really notice him in a room. I don't know. It's like none of those things that she mentioned like feels like it warrants oh, no, don't worry, you're nothing like him. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's why I think I'm saying, like, I think the reason she said you're nothing like him is because she thought, oh, he's referring to the suicide. Oh no, what if he's saying there's some of my father in me, like, meaning he's depressed and wants to kill himself. So I think she was saying there's none of that in you. And he took it as, oh, there's none of the man I look up to.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, it was a really good scene. One of my favorite scenes in the movie. One of the few scenes that you get to breathe before, you're on the edge of your seat for the rest of the time. But hey, I want to jump into the bit of the podcast, which we're kind of named after, The Holy Moment. Just a hair of background. We here at the Holy Moment podcast want to look on the positive of every movie. We want to take time, even Vega, he didn't love this movie, understandably, but we want to do our best to respect that these are filmmakers putting a lot of work to make movies and to grow ourselves as filmmakers. We're looking for that holy moment. It doesn't have to, it could be as specific as one tiny scene, one tiny piece of dialogue, all the way up into like something really big, like thematically, or like a whole performance of an actor. But just the part of the movie that was the best representation of what it could have been for this movie. And we're gonna kick ourselves off with let's go with Vega. Let's hear the man that didn't like the movie as much. Vega, what was your holy moment with this movie and why?
I think my holy moment, in some really wrapped around way, is the moment when the brother holds up that I was drugged and left for dead in Mexico, and all I got was this stupid t-shirt thing. Y'all want to know why? Y'all want to know how I'm rolling this back in?
Why? Please.
Well, honestly, so do I. I think that part kind of just speaks to this film on a multitude of levels. I don't think super worked for me. I don't think it was written for me. I don't think it was anything of that kind of thing, of that kind of nature, perhaps. However, something that kind of was like, oh, this is just insane. This is just this part maybe wraps it up to me. That makes it not like the most boring, asinine movie I've ever watched. Was kind of how absolutely absurd that would be in that moment, to crash out so hard that you shoot your brother, and then your brother holds up that t-shirt and says happy birthday. I think I've kind of like maybe like a few wires in my brain have kind of like caused me maybe to crash out a few times. Maybe not as extreme as jumping off a building after shooting my own brother, but like I kind of get a little bit of that. Like, there's no possible way that this is actually maybe insane. Of it's so funny, but it's also so like insane that there's like a certain particular weird niche emotion intersecting with all of the weird things that are going on in this movie. In that moment, that was like, okay, maybe this part like kind of brought it from having 0 stars to 2 stars all on its own.
Yeah. Eh, which kind of makes sense for you who's someone who didn't vibe, enjoy the movie. It's interesting that you probably picked the moment that was the most jarring to me, which would make sense because it was the most jarring moment of the movie. It was the final twist. He falls through the skylight, lands on the big pillow, gets out of the big pillow, and immediately his brother like pulls out the shirt that says, I was drugged and left in Mexico and all I got was a stupid t-shirt. It was the most like out of place, jarring moment for me in the movie. Not that I didn't like it, but it really threw me for a ringer. So it makes sense that a movie that you were not into, invested in, enthralled by, the moment that pulled you out the most, like that pulled me out the most, was maybe your holy moment. So like I guess that kind of tracks. What about you, Jeffrey?
Early on, I might have said something about just how this movie created a sense of anxiety and paranoia. Honestly, one of the notes I made was that this feels very much like the experience of a paranoid schizophrenic. And I don't say that just to say that. I have relatives with paranoid schizophrenia, and they're constantly seeing patterns and things and making connections that aren't there. And um, uh, they tend to believe that these massive conspiracies are going on and that everyone is conspiring against them. It's like one of my relatives was talking to me about the color, like turquoise. And he was saying that there was something about it that felt suspicious, and he wondered out loud if somehow people were communicating with the color turquoise or trying to send him messages because he would see it often, turquoise here, turquoise there. But also just encrypted messages and the radio or on the news or in songs. It just felt overbearing and oppressive, and it's like I can't trust anything of what I'm experiencing. And that was really impressive to me. I would say that is a holy moment for sure. It's not one moment, more many moments in conjunction to create an effect of paranoia. But then also just the scene in the kitchen. It was very humanizing. And like you, Nathaniel, I liked the character from the get-go. I thought that he was a charming guy to follow, but that moment in particular sort of called back to the pivotal moment in his life in a way that felt real.
Yeah, especially that scene in the kitchen. I feel like for such a like I want to say out of touch movie. I mean, like it's not super grounded, especially as it goes on. It gets crazier and crazier and crazier. But that scene might have been the most grounded, to use verbiage from Vega, like kind of humanistic. That like actually like it feels like real people. It feels like something that could happen. It feels like they're expressing something vulnerable and real. It's probably that scene in the whole movie that feels the most that way. Yeah, no, that's a good holy moment. For me, I cannot lie and say the reason I'm picking this holy moment, I would say has less to do with this movie and more to do with movies I've been watching in the recent weeks. So a little bit of background. I don't like watch an insane amount of movies, but I feel like the movies I've been watching are just like a lot more, they're just new movies. And new movies don't do storytelling how we used to do storytelling. I think new movies can be really great. Don't get me wrong. And I think they've evolved storytelling in certain aspects that are better than old movies. And I think their visuals and they have a lot of good things going for them. I'm not someone that's sitting here like, the golden age of Hollywood is over. Everything's garbage. No, I some of my favorite movies, are from like recent years. So I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is there is a certain amount of storytelling that has absolutely been lost with movies. And you just don't see movies made like this anymore. Let me give an example. My girlfriend and I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 nights ago, sat down and watched Blue Beetle at my suggestion. I really wanted to watch it, and I actually had a good time with it. Was it great? No. Was it fun, entertaining, an okay time? Yeah, it was. But my girlfriend made a comment because she also then watched, 2, 3 nights later, the game with me, and she just made a comment. She was like, "Wow!" In the first minute, because the movie opens with a montage of Nick's like 10th birthday party. So after that montage, she's like, within the first minute, with no dialogue, we know more about this character than we knew about any of the characters in Blue Beetle, and not a single word was said. So to specify, my holy moment was the small, small, small details that are so clearly not there by accident. And if you blink, you miss them, because they're not moments that are shouted at you, said to you. There are moments that just like reverberate in a room and settle. This is going to sound really douchey and artsy, but like they're just moments that you can't pick up on unless A, you're really, really trying hard to, or B, maybe you have a trained eye. I'm not saying if you don't pick up on these moments and like acknowledge them mentally, it makes you any less of like a smart person or a movie watcher. That just, like, honestly, you're not meant to pick up on them intellectually. They're supposed to affect you subtly. And it's these moments that reminded me, like, holy crap, we used to make movies this way and we don't as much. We still do to some degree. And also, storytelling is advancing and evolving in a different direction that, again, is good in its own right. But two quick examples. They happen within the first 5 minutes of the movie, and I was blown away. The first example is really early on in the movie. Nick gets a phone call from Conrad, and he's like, "Hey, meet me for lunch at this restaurant." So they go to the restaurant, and it's a really fancy restaurant, and they order food, and they're having this conversation. And this is the scene where Conrad is like, "Hey, I went to this company. It was great. You should go to this company." And the whole time we are doing the scene, we do not see a waiter or waitress's head. They very specifically shoot it to where Nick and Conrad are sitting, and a waiter will come up to ask them a question, like, "Do you want to order something? Do you want a menu?" And they're cut off at like the chest, like kind of at your what's this bone called?
Collarbone?
Your collarbone. Yeah, like they're cut off at the collarbone. And maybe someone would think, "What does this frame mean? It's bad. I can't see who's talking." But it's so intentionally done that way to get into the mind space of Nick, of like, hey, these people don't even matter to him. They're so beneath him, which that does kind of subtextually say he's the dick. But then the moment that really got me was, maybe 15 minutes into the movie, after the first day, he goes and does the test at CRM. He thinks about doing it. He goes home. We find out it's his birthday, and his maid was like, "Hey, I left you dinner in the oven. Happy birthday, Nick." And then he goes into this mansion, and it is quiet and it is dark, and he takes the food out of the oven. He takes a cupcake out of like one of those glass dessert jars, and every single movement echoes. It just reverberates through this house. Him taking the cupcake out, him setting down the metal tray, him picking up a cup. And it just goes to show how alone this man is. And while he's doing it, he's humming happy birthday to himself. So it's just these really small moments that aren't even meant always to be recognized in the mind, but more felt in the heart, that I think we just don't do anymore in movies. And if we do, they're not always done to the same effect. And it was just in watching, Blue Beetle, it just reminds me of like, wow, we don't trust the audience anymore. If we don't tell them that family is important, then by golly, how are they going to know that family is important? If we don't tell them that this object carries significance, then how is the audience going to know it carries significance? I wish filmmakers trusted the audience more to pick up on things. And also, that's what makes movies rewatchable. If you can't enjoy something 100% the first time you consume it, whether it's music, movie, television, I think we think it's bad. I mean, I'm not going to get on a big soapbox like, oh, shorts like on YouTube are garbage. I'm not trying to say I watch a lot of shorts, but it's like the idea, if we can't consume something in 60 seconds and understand all of it, then there's no point in it. I think there's a lot of point in art that you cannot consume and understand and digest in one sitting. And I think it's a shame that I think as humans, we're losing that patience and that skill to redigest something over and over again until we get something out of it. So that's my holy moment.
That's why I try. I don't always succeed. I didn't succeed this time, but that's why I always try to watch the movie that we're going to do an episode about twice before we record. Because I do pick up on new things, and it does shape my understanding of the film.
I think I partially agree. I don't know if I completely agree at like what you're saying. I think what you're saying may be so totally true for big bigger or a lot more modern studio backed movies, but I do think there are still like a lot of such a deep amount of intentionality put into a lot of like, okay, well, asterisks. Back in college, I didn't really get into movies like this. I wasn't really like a super big like fanboy of, not saying like, oh, I'm not like other people who go to school, but like I never really super got into that whole culture of like, well, I really love Fincher. Well, I don't actually, I really love like every single film school student ever. I love Wes Anderson, and I think I'm the most original person doing to do exactly what he's doing, kind of thing. But not even acknowledging that he's probably copying like 4 other people. But I thought something that was really different. I mean, not that there's not feature films that are also sort of maybe making things in this space still that just aren't super getting a lot of recognition. I think there's so much like mid-range to longer, bordering on a short feature length films that exist just somewhere tucked away online that probably went to a film festival and then they just exist on like Vimeo or YouTube or some other weird niche of the internet that exist like this that just aren't necessarily getting the same level as what's it called? They just don't get the same platform as movies. Like I personally kind of like Blue Beetle, but I do completely agree with what you were saying with it.
Yeah,
I just don't think it's dead.
Yeah, I really appreciate you pushing back, and I have 2 things. I'll say really quick because we have a bit of a deadline tonight, so we won't be able to rant as long as possible. But I agree with you. I don't want to cast such a wide net to say like this type of technique in story film telling is dead. No, you even do sometimes see it in big studio movies, but in general, a big studio movie is not going to do this because a big studio movie wants to make sure their audience understands the movie because they want to make money. Blah 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 blah. But there's definitely some big studio movies that do it, some indie films that do it, some short films that do it, some feature films that, like you said, they just don't have the platform to do it. I more or less agree that it hasn't fully died, but where I will push back on your pushback is this. And we got this, we got into this on a different episode that we recorded, kind of the test episode when we're starting the podcast, when we talked about the Deer Hunter. I think films don't, and not every single film ever made anymore, but I really do believe that like most films do not practice the same sort of patience and not pointing the audience towards something uber specific and emotion, even if it's done in a really artful way or an interesting way and not verbalized but subtext. There still is a certain amount of pushing the audience towards something. And I will say now I'm not even necessarily talking about The Game anymore and what I brought up as the holy moment, but I'm just trying to push back and say I do think there's a little bit of this concept lost of like patiently creating and evoking an emotion that is connected to the story that is done through not specifically telling our audience what to think or where to look. I think that is actually slightly a dying art that I think is a shame. And I'm not going to say that it is dead because there are so many amazing filmmakers out there, so much stuff I haven't seen. So it would be, ignorant for me to say it doesn't exist anymore. But what I will say is I do think it is like, 60 years ago, shallow depth of field, sorry, not to get into something super specific, but like shallow depth of field was not considered as cinematic as deep depth of field. And now in these movies nowadays, it's considered much more cinematic to have a shallow depth of field compared to a deep depth of field. So all I'm saying is I do think cinema is always evolving and not always for better or for worse. Who's to say it's better for it to be shallow depth of field versus not shallow depth of field? Who's to say this way of telling stories better or not better? But I do think there is a certain amount of we've gotten away from telling stories with that don't have to be so precise in telling the audience what to think. I would love to get more into this on a different episode, and I'll just think about it and we can flesh our ideas out a little more. But there's just there's an idea there that I do think we as storytellers in this generation, how we've been impacted by the previous generation, have slowly gone away from telling stories how they were told in the 1980s, which would make sense. Yeah. And that's just how
that's totally fair.
Art is going to be forever.
Hashtag dying but not dead.
Yeah, I like that. But yeah, thank you for pushing back on that Vega. But to wrap things up, guys, we gotta give this movie a ranking. And I'm just gonna really quickly give a little spiel about our ranking system. Once again, we're trying our best to be positive, like have positive outlook on movies. We're not trying to be like 1 is garbage and 10 is amazing. Our ranking system is 7 rankings. They are different degrees of holiness. When we say holy, we do not mean a religious holy. Like, man, if they preach the gospel, it's the best. It's not that. Holy is just the idea of, did the filmmaker use every single weapon in their arsenal and utilize it correctly to convey the best story that they were trying to tell? Because not every story is the same. Not every story needs the same components to be told the same ways. But did they do everything within their power to tell their story the best as they could? So we have 7 rankings. This is how they go order from most holy to least holy. We have the holy moment. Number 2, Creator Adamos. Number 3, the drunken monk. Number 4, the prudish grandmother. Number 5, the forbidden fruit. Number 6, fire and brimstone. And number 7, anathema. Whatever ranking we give it, we'll dive into that ranking a little more specifically. But real quick, Jeffrey, what ranking and why?
Drunken Monk.
Drunken monk.
Yeah, and I give it that because I had a lot of fun with this. I was very entertained by it, as I might with a monk that is drunk, right? Just a night on the town with this guy. And the ending of the movie as well sort of lends that flavor to it of, oh, wow, you took me on this whole journey for this, you know? But this isn't bad at all. It's something that perhaps I wouldn't have, thought to look for. I don't know if that makes sense. You took me on a journey, and I enjoyed that journey. So,
what about you, Vega? What's your ranking?
I don't know if this is the correct or like whatever we initially set out to talk about for like the ranking system. I'm just also probably gonna give it the Drunken Monk. Was it an experience? Yeah. Was it a journey? Yeah. But it kind of stumbled into something like really, really interesting and cool and neat, and like what my holy moment was for it stumbling into that. But I don't know if it was by accident. I haven't super read too much into why the film was made, any of that kind of thing. So maybe this was a lot more intentional than I'm giving it credit for. But that particular part working the way it did for me, I think, is probably why I'm just gonna leave it at Drunken Monk. It kind of, maybe it stumbled a little bit of a rocky ride, had a neat landing and then a second landing and then a t-shirt that I really, really want.
It really is like when someone falls off a building in a cartoon. They fall and they bounce 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 and they bounce, but then they get a t-shirt at the end of it. No, that's totally fair. I think on the first, when I was watching it, I was like, I'm gonna give this career to Adamus. But I think it's because I was so hung up on the idea of like, man, they are doing, like my holy moment, they are doing the things in film that I wish films did more, but they're not anymore. But I think that's not quite fair because, again, like Vega said, there are a lot of movies that still do it. And there are so many movies before, the game came along that did it as well. So it's not like groundbreaking with what they did. It's just appreciative of someone who doesn't see it now as often. So I think I'm also going to give it the Drunken Monk. It was a freaking fun time. I think probably getting drunk with a monk would be kind of a good time until you wake up and probably feel very ashamed because you made a monk drunk. But yeah, I'm going to stick with the Drunken Monk as well, which I think that makes 2 weeks in a row that all 3 of us give a movie the Drunken Monk. I think we gave Fallen Angels all a Drunken Monk as well. But yeah, Jeffrey, you have the hat. So let's prove if we are conspiring against you. If it's your name, we are not. If it's Vega's name or my name, we are conspiring against you. So here you go. Drum, 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 drum. Drum. That's all the drumming you get.
I'll drum a little more.
Yeah, you can't make me drum. You don't own me.
Vega.
Drumming. Well,
Don't
There
pull
we go.
Jeffrey's name. Don't pull Jeffrey's name. All right, here we go.
I know
My
his
heart
heart
is
just
beating.
dropped.
Dude, my heart is like racing, not even lying.
The Muppet Movie. It's me.
Oh, okay. The finally a lighthearted movie.
I like
Yeah.
almost don't believe that that's what he pulled.
Yeah.
I'll
the
show
camera.
it. I'll
the
show it to
camera.
y'all. I was honestly kind of hoping for Galaxy Quest, but hey, I'll take it.
I really want Galaxy Quest too. Okay, it's the Muppet movie.
The Muppet
Well,
Movie.
folks, That means you have until next Monday to go watch the Muppet movie. That's a lot more lighthearted than David Fincher's The Game. So go watch it, have a good time, eat some popcorn, and watch some grown men put their hands up puppets' butts. But again, thank you so much for joining us here at the Holy Moment Podcast. You can listen to us on Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple iTunes. If you want to watch us, you can watch us on YouTube. And also, starting this week, all of our videos on Spotify will have videos along with them. Also, check out our Instagram, our YouTube, our TikTok for fun little reels of us ranting and riffing. But until next time, guys, we think you're a wonderful people. We're always here to conspire against Jeffrey. Jeffrey's not even a real person. We will see you guys next week. Get some rest.